ensuring the son who bled them dry gets everything, while the son who bled for them gets nothing. Are you kidding me? This is exactly why you shouldn't blindly trust your family with your wallet. We have a completely insane story today about a guy who funded his entire family, only to get stabbed in the back. And his revenge is glorious. Let's get right into. My parents gave the entire inheritance to my brother in their will and excluded me, so I stopped paying their bills. But weeks later, my mom told me the mortgage was due. I blocked her. My name is Arthur, and I need to tell you something that completely shattered my world 3 weeks ago. I am 48 years old, a construction project manager, and a man who has built his life on concrete, calluses, and sweat equity. For the past 9 years, I have been the one keeping my family afloat financially. Every month, without fail, I have paid for my parents' groceries, their medications, their doctor visits, utility bills, and the relentless house maintenance for both properties our family owns. I never complained. I never held it over their heads because I love them, and honestly, I thought this was just what good sons do when they step up to be the man of the house. I work 60-hour weeks. I breathe in drywall dust and exhaust fumes. I'm not a millionaire, but I grind hard enough to make a decent living, covering my own expenses and theirs, too. My brother Kevin, on the other hand, has been a parasite for most of his adult life. He is 35 years old, still lives in his childhood bedroom with our parents, and spends his days jumping from one delusional, failed business idea to another. When he isn't losing money, he's playing video games. He hasn't held a steady job for more than 3 months in his entire life. He has soft hands and a loud mouth. Last Tuesday, I was sitting in Mr. Vance's office. He's been our family lawyer since I was a teenager. My mother, Martha, had asked me to take off work and come with her to discuss some routine paperwork regarding the estate. I sat down in that heavy leather chair, wiping grease from my hands, assuming I'd just be signing some standard proxy forms. What I didn't expect was to discover that my mother had secretly drafted a new will. A will that left both of our family properties, the primary residence on Pine Avenue and the rental property on Elm Street, exclusively to Kevin. Both houses, the only real tangible assets our family name holds, built by my hard-working grandparents who survived the Depression and started with nothing. I sat there, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs, staring at the documents. I read the same typed lines over and over until the letters blurred. All real property, including the family residence on Pine Avenue and the rental property on Elm Street, shall be bequeathed to Kevin Robert Miller. Not a single mention of my name anywhere in the inheritance section. Not a percentage. Not a footnote. Nothing. Wow. Those parents really suck. I mean, how can you completely exclude the guy keeping a roof over your head? Not even a percentage. What would you guys do if you found out your parents did this to you? There must be some mistake, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous gravel. I looked up at Mr. Vance. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, refusing to meet my gaze directly. He shifted uncomfortably in his expensive suit. I'm afraid not, Arthur. Your mother was very specific about her wishes when she came to me last month. I slowly turned my head to look at my mother. She was rigidly staring at the mahogany desk, her fingers white-knuckling her purse strap. Mom, I said, fighting to keep the tremor of absolute fury out of my voice. Is this really what you want? She finally forced herself to meet my eyes, and what I saw there wasn't just guilt. It was a stubborn, twisted maternal entitlement. Arthur, you're a self-made man, she said, her voice defensive. You have your own life, your own house. Kevin needs a safety net. He needs a place to live. He needs security. Security? I stood up so fast my heavy work boots scraped loudly against the hardwood floor, making the lawyer flinch. What about the security I've been providing for 9 years? I demanded. What about the tens of thousands of dollars of my hard-earned money I've spent keeping food in your refrigerator, keeping the heat on in the winter, and fixing the roof over both of those houses? That's different, she stammered, her face flushing. That's just helping family. These houses, they need to stay as Kevin's foundation. He's fragile, Arthur. My blood ran cold. The rage I felt wasn't just about the monthly grocery bills. It was about the dagger buried in my back from 3 years ago. A dagger my parents were pretending didn't exist. A safety net? I stepped closer to her, my voice dropping to a whisper that echoed louder than a shout. 3 years ago, your fragile son forged my signature on federal documents to secure a $35,000 loan for some crypto scam. He committed federal fraud. Mom. He faced 5 years in a state penitentiary. And who bailed him out? Who drained their savings to pay off that 35 grand in one lump, some so the bank wouldn't press charges. My mother shrank back into her chair, her lips trembling. Arthur, please. No, don't Arthur please me, I snapped. Dad looked me in the eye and swore to God, that if I paid off Kevin's felony debt and kept him out of prison, the Elm Street house would be signed over to me as compensation. That was the deal. I bought his freedom with my sweat, and you promised me equity. And now you're giving the house I paid to maintain, and the house I paid a ransom for, to the very thief who stole from me. Mr. Vance cleared his throat nervously. Perhaps we should discuss this private family matter at home, Arthur. I grabbed my hard hat from the desk. My hands were shaking, not from sorrow, but from a profound volcanic disgust. No, Vance. I think I've heard exactly what I needed to hear. I looked down at my mother one last time. You made your choice. I walked out of that office, the heavy oak door slamming shut behind me. The drive back to my job site was a blur of highway lines and blinding anger. 9 years of sacrificing my own retirement fund. 9 years of working weekends, missing out on my own life, to make sure they never went without. And this was the ultimate payoff, ensuring the son who bled them dry gets everything, while the son who bled for them gets nothing. When I got home to my own quiet, empty house that evening, I didn't pour a drink. I didn't turn on the television. I walked straight into my home office, booted up my computer, and did something I never thought a son should ever have to do. I opened my banking archives. I am a project manager. My entire career is based on tracking costs, labor, and materials. I pulled up the spreadsheets. I went back 9 years, month by month, year by year. I calculated the grocery deliveries. I calculated the gas, water, and electric bills for both Pine Avenue and the Elm Street rental. I added the medications, the property insurance premiums I secretly covered, the furnace repair in 2018, the new plumbing in 2020. And then, at the very bottom of the column, I added the $35,000 wire transfer that kept my criminal brother out of a jumpsuit. I hit the sum button. The number flashed on the screen, glaring in harsh white pixels against the dark monitor. $254,830. Over $250,000. $250,000 extracted from my physical labor, handed over to people who didn't even consider me worthy of a footnote in their legacy. Wait, what? $250,000? This woman has to have something wrong in her head to behave this way. They protected a felon and used Arthur as an ATM. How much longer could he possibly take this abuse? I sat back in my chair, staring at the number until my vision blurred. I didn't feel sad anymore. The grief had been instantly incinerated by a cold, calculating clarity. I had been a fool. I had been a financial workhorse, blinded by the word family. That night, I made a decision that would permanently alter the foundation of our bloodline. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. I made a pot of black coffee, sat down at my kitchen island with my laptop, and went to work. I didn't just cancel things. I executed a systematic financial demolition. First, I logged into my bank and permanently deleted the recurring transfers to their joint checking account. Next, I called the utility companies. Electric, gas, water, internet, and premium cable for both Pine Avenue and Elm Street, all disconnected from my credit card. I canceled the weekly grocery delivery service. I canceled the landscaper who mowed their lawns. I even called the pharmacy and removed my card from their file for my father's blood pressure medication. Every click of the mouse, every phone call, felt like a 100-pound cinder block being lifted off my chest. For 9 years, I had carried the suffocating weight of their survival. By 8 a.m., I had brutally severed every single financial artery I had built for them. Then I printed out the spreadsheet. 5 pages of line items, stapled together, with the grand total highlighted in thick yellow marker. I drove my truck to Pine Avenue. My father, Robert, was sitting on the front porch reading the morning paper. He looked up, surprised to see me during work hours. My mother came out of the screen door, wiping her hands on a dish towel, a strained, nervous smile on her face. She was pretending yesterday hadn't happened. "Arthur," my dad said, folding his paper, "what brings you by? We weren't expecting you." I walked up the concrete steps I had repaired myself 5 years ago, and slammed the stapled packet of papers down on the patio table. "We need to have a very clear, very final conversation," I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. My mother looked at the papers, her nervous smile faltering. "Arthur, please, about yesterday. You'll understand when you have a moment to calm down. Kevin just needs—" "I am completely calm, Mom. Look at the paper." My father put on his reading glasses and picked up the packet. His eyes scanned the first page, then the second. The color began to drain from his weathered face. "Arthur, what is this?" "That is a heavily detailed ledger of the $254,830 I have spent keeping this family alive over the last 9 years," I said, my voice echoing off the brick siding. "That includes the groceries you ate this morning, the electricity powering your television, and the $35,000 I paid to keep your youngest son out of federal prison for forgery." "Son, you know we appreciate—" my father started. "No, you don't—" I cut him off, stepping into his space. "Appreciation is respect. What you did was exploitation. You lied to me, Dad. You shook my hand and told me Elm Street was mine if I saved Kevin. You used my honor against me to protect a thief." "He's your brother," my mother cried out. "He's not a thief, he just made a mistake. He forged my name on financial documents, and your response is to reward him with a $400,000 estate while I foot the bill for his lifestyle." I pointed a calloused finger at the papers. "Read my lips. As of 8 a.m. this morning, I have canceled every single payment. The utilities, the groceries, the insurance. All of it." My father dropped the papers onto the table. "Arthur, you can't be serious. We are on a fixed income. We can't afford all of those bills on Social Security. Then I suggest you walk upstairs, wake up the 35-year-old child sleeping in the guest room, and tell him to get a job," I said, my tone absolute ice. "He's inheriting properties worth nearly $500,000. It's time he learns how to pay the electric bill." "This is vindictive, Arthur," my mother sobbed, clutching her chest. "You're punishing us for trying to protect your brother." I looked at these two people, the parents I had revered, the people I had broken my back to serve, and I felt absolutely nothing but a hollow metallic resolve. "If I'm not worthy of inheriting the properties I bought and paid for," I said, looking my father dead in the eye, "then I'm not responsible for maintaining them anymore. You made your bed. Now let Kevin make it for you." That is a very creative way to teach an idiot a lesson. You made your bed. Let Kevin make it for you. Who do you think you are, expecting him to keep paying? Have any of you ever had to cut off a toxic family member like this? I turned my back on them, walked down the stairs, and got into my truck. I didn't look in the rearview mirror as I drove away. It only took 2 weeks for the reality of my absence to hit them like a freight train. When you remove the pillars holding up a decaying structure, the collapse is swift and brutal. The first domino to fall was the Elm Street rental. The power company cut the electricity. My mother tried to call me 6 times that day. I watched her name flash on my phone screen while I ate my lunch on a steel beam 3 stories in the air. I let it ring, chewing my sandwich in absolute peace. I eventually changed their contact ringtones to silent. The second wave hit their primary residence on Pine Avenue. The premium cable package they loved so much vanished. The high-speed internet went dark. Suddenly, my father couldn't watch his golf tournaments, and Kevin couldn't play his online multiplayer games. By the 3rd week, the financial drought was extreme. They were rationing food. I knew all of this not because they told me, but because Mrs. Gable, their next-door neighbor of 20 years, ambushed me at my active construction site. I was going over blueprints on the hood of my truck when she pulled up. She navigated through the dust and gravel, looking deeply concerned. "Arthur," she said, her voice tight, "I need to talk to you about your parents. I didn't put down the blueprints." "Hello, Mrs. Gable. I'm on the clock. What is it?" "They are struggling, Arthur. It's bad. Your father, Robert, was asking my husband yesterday if he knew anyone in the neighborhood who needed their gutters cleaned or lawns mowed. He's 76 years old, Arthur. He's looking for manual day labor. And your mother is returning items at the grocery store because she's short on change. What is going on? You've always been their rock." I slowly rolled up the blueprints and placed them in a heavy PVC tube. I looked at Mrs. Gable, a sweet woman who used to bake me pies when I was a kid. I knew what my parents were doing. They were playing the victims, letting the neighborhood think they're cruel. Wealthy son had abandoned them for no reason. "Did they tell you why I stopped paying their bills, Mrs. Gable?" I asked calmly. She shifted uncomfortably. "They just said you got angry over some paperwork." "Paperwork?" I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "Did they tell you that paperwork was a secret while giving every asset they own to Kevin? Did they mention that I've spent over $250,000 supporting them for the last 9 years? Mrs. Gable's eyes widened, her jaw dropping slightly. $250,000? No, they didn't say that. Did they also tell you? I took a step closer, my voice low and steady. That 3 years ago, Kevin committed wire fraud? He forged my signature for a $35,000 loan and lost it all. I paid it off to keep him out of federal prison, because my parents promised me the Elm Street house in return. And now, they've secretly willed both houses to the thief. Mrs. Gable physically recoiled, her hand flying to her mouth. Kevin, fraud? Oh my God. Arthur, I had no idea. I thought. You thought I was just a bad son abandoning his helpless parents. I finished for her. I'm not. I'm a man who finally stopped letting his family rob him blind. If Kevin wants the houses, Kevin can pay the bills. Have a good day, Mrs. Gable. She left the site looking like she had seen a ghost. I knew the neighborhood gossip mill would do its work by nightfall. But the social pressure didn't stop there. People who are comfortable spending your money are always the most outraged when the ATM shuts down. The breaking point came on a Sunday evening. I was in my garage, rebuilding a carburetor on an old Mustang, when a shadow fell over the driveway. It was Pastor Thomas from my parents' church. He stood there in his dark suit, holding a Bible, looking at my grease-stained hands with a mixture of pity and righteous judgment. "Arthur," he said in his practiced, soothing pulpit voice, "your mother came to see me. She is a broken woman. I came here to speak to you about the biblical duty of honoring thy father and mother, and the grace of forgiveness." I wiped my hands on a heavy shop rag, tossing my wrench onto the workbench with a loud metallic clatter. I didn't invite him inside. "Pastor Thomas," I said, leaning against the fender of the car. "I respect the collar, but I don't need a sermon in my own garage. Let me ask you a theological question." He blinked, clearly thrown off by my aggressive stance. "Go ahead, son. If someone in your flock robbed his own brother of $35,000 through felony fraud, and the parents rewarded that thief with the entire family estate while simultaneously draining the victim's wallet for 9 years to fund the thief's lifestyle, what would you call that? Would you call that a family? Or would you call it a cartel?" The pastor's face flushed. He opened his mouth, then closed it. "Earthly possessions are fleeting, Arthur. Bitterness rots the soul. Family is bound by blood and unconditional love." "Unconditional love?" I scoffed, pointing a stained finger at him. "My love was unconditional for 9 years. Their love was highly conditional. It was conditioned on me remaining a silent workhorse while they funneled my labor into my brother's pockets. God tells us to forgive, Pastor. He doesn't tell us to be an accessory to our own financial execution. You want to save a soul? Go to Pine Avenue and save Kevin's." Pastor Thomas stared at me for a long moment, recognizing that there was no guilt left in me to manipulate. He offered a stiff nod and walked away. I went back to my engine, my hands steady, my conscience completely clear. The drought was working, and I knew, inevitably, the real panic was about to set in. Week 5 of my financial embargo. The structural integrity of my parents' lies finally began to crack. My phone rang at 5:30 a.m. on a Tuesday. The caller ID showed my mother's cell phone. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something about the hour told me this wasn't just a guilt trip. This was an emergency. I answered, putting the phone on speaker while I laced up my steel-toed boots. "Hello," I grunted. "Arthur." "Oh, thank God you answered." My mother was hysterical. She wasn't just crying. She was hyperventilating, her voice shrill with raw terror. "Arthur, you have to help us. Please, I am begging you. We're going to lose everything." I paused, a bootlace wrapped around my fingers. "Calm down. Lose what?" "The house. The Elm Street house," she sobbed. "We got papers delivered yesterday. A notice of default. The bank is foreclosing, Arthur. They're going to take it." I frowned, my mind instantly analyzing the variables. "Foreclosure? Mom, what are you talking about? Grandpa paid off Elm Street in 1995. There is no mortgage on that property." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. All I could hear was her ragged breathing. "Mom," I said, my voice dropping an octave, razor sharp. "What did you do?" Your father," she stammered, the words tumbling out through her tears. 3 years ago, after Kevin's legal trouble. Your father took out a massive home equity loan against Elm Street to cover some bad investments he made trying to get Kevin's money back. We took out a mortgage. It's $1,650 a month. I stopped breathing. The room seemed to tilt. A $1,650 a month mortgage. How? I demanded, the pieces falling into a horrifying puzzle in my brain. How are you paying a $1,600 mortgage on your Social Security? We weren't, she whimpered. A cold, absolute rage washed over me, freezing the blood in my veins. 3 years ago, I said, my voice deadly quiet. You told me the county did a reassessment. You told me the property taxes on both houses had skyrocketed. You asked me to increase my monthly deposits to cover the taxes. I gave you an extra $1,700 a month. For 3 years. Arthur, please understand. You lied to me? I roared, the sound echoing off the walls of my kitchen. You didn't just use my money to buy groceries. You lied to my face, stole my money under false pretenses, and used it to pay the secret mortgage on a house you had legally willed to Kevin. Oh my God. She lied to his face and used his money to pay the secret mortgage for the house she gave to Kevin. This kind of entitlement blows my mind every single time. How are these people not in jail right now? We were trapped, she cried. We didn't want you to be mad at your father. We were going to figure it out. I did the math instantly. 36 months. $1,650. I paid $59,000. For $100 toward a mortgage I didn't know existed. For a house I wasn't going to inherit. I stated, the sheer audacity of their betrayal making me dizzy. How much are you behind? 3 months, she sobbed. Since you stopped the transfers. With penalties, we owe over $5,000 to catch up. And the total loan balance is still $92,000. They've given us 30 days or it goes to public auction. If we lose it, Kevin's inheritance is cut in half. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. They were calling the man they defrauded, begging him to save the asset they had stolen for the son who had robbed him. And what exactly does your brilliant entrepreneur son Kevin say about this? I asked, my voice dripping with venom. He doesn't have the money, Arthur. You know he's between ventures right now. Put him on the phone. Arthur, he's sleeping. I said put him on the phone, I bellowed. I heard rustling, footsteps, a muffled argument, and then Kevin's groggy, arrogant voice came through the speaker. Yo, Arthur. Look, man, you're really stressing Mom out. You need to chill. Shut your mouth and listen to me, you parasite, I said. Your inheritance is currently in pre-foreclosure because I stopped paying the secret mortgage mom and dad tricked me into funding. If you want Elm Street, you have 30 days to come up with $5,000, and then $1,650 a month after that. Bro, I don't have liquid capital like that, Kevin scoffed, sounding more annoyed than panicked. My assets are tied up in digital infrastructure right now. I'm an entrepreneur. You make the big bucks playing with dirt. Just pay the bank, man. We're family. Tell you what, if you save the house, I'll talk to Mom about cutting you in for 20% of the will. Sound fair? 20%. He was offering me 20% of a house I had already paid a ransom on, and unknowingly paid the mortgage on for 3 years. I let out a low, dark chuckle. It wasn't a sound of amusement. It was the sound of a man who had finally, completely detached. Kevin, I said softly. Yeah, bro? Get a job and earn it, parasite. Watch your empire burn. Arthur, wait! My mother screamed in the background. I ended the call. I didn't just hang up. I went into my phone settings and permanently blocked my mother's number. I blocked my father's number. I blocked Kevin. I blocked my aunts, my uncles, and anyone else who shared their DNA. I sat in the silence of my kitchen. They had crossed a line that could never, ever be uncrossed. They hadn't just taken me for granted. They had orchestrated a multi-year financial conspiracy against me to protect the golden child. I picked up my steel-toed boots, finished tying them, and stood up. I felt dangerous. I felt free. I walked out to my truck, the morning sun just beginning to break over the horizon. They were on their own. Let the bank take it. Let them reap the whirlwind they had sown. But I didn't know yet that the universe, and the meticulous legal fine print of the banking system, was about to hand me the ultimate weapon of vengeance. For 2 months, my world was entirely silent. No phone calls, no text messages, no manipulative voicemails left in the middle of the night. I worked my construction sites during the day, breathing in the familiar, comforting sense of sawdust and curing concrete, and I went home to a quiet house. For the first time in 9 years, my bank account was growing. The money I used to bleed out every month to sustain my parents and my brother was now accumulating, a tangible testament to my reclaimed freedom. I didn't know what was happening on Pine Avenue, and I didn't care. I had surgically removed the infection from my life. But the universe has a funny way of balancing the scales, often using the cold, indifferent machinery of the banking system to do it. It was a Tuesday afternoon when I found the thick, certified envelope stuffed into my mailbox. The return address belonged to the legal department of the national bank that held the secret mortgage on the Elm Street rental property. I stood in my driveway, tearing the heavy paper open with my thumb, expecting it to be some sort of final notice of auction that they had mistakenly routed to me. Instead, what I read made my heart stop, and then start beating again with a slow, heavy, triumphant rhythm. The letter was a formal legal notification regarding the pre-foreclosure status of the Elm Street property. Because my personal checking account had been the originating source of the direct deposit mortgage payments for 36 consecutive months, the bank's automated system had flagged me as a primary financial stakeholder. The legal jargon was dense, but the bottom line was glaringly clear. As the individual who had actively serviced the debt, I had equitable standing to intervene. I had the legal right to cure the default, assume the mortgage note, and take possession of the property to prevent the bank from taking a total loss at a public auction. My parents had practically abandoned the property, unable to pay. The bank didn't care whose name was on the secret will. They only cared about who had the capital to keep the ledger in the green. I didn't go inside my house. I got straight back into my truck and drove directly to the office of Mr. Vance, the family lawyer who had sat in silence while my mother handed my legacy over to Kevin. I didn't have an appointment. I walked past his receptionist, my heavy boots thudding against the carpet, and pushed his office door open. He looked up from his desk, startled. "Arthur," he said, adjusting his glasses. "This is highly irregular. I cannot discuss your parents' estate with you. You made your position very clear." I tossed the certified bank letter onto his pristine mahogany desk. "I'm not here to discuss their estate, Vance. I'm here to discuss my property. Read it." He hesitated, then picked up the document. As his eyes scanned the legal phrasing, his professional composure slipped. His eyebrows shot up and he read the second page twice. "They are offering you the right of assumption," Vance murmured, almost in disbelief. "Because you were the sole source of the payments, and because Robert and Martha have formally ignored the default notices, the bank is allowing you to bypass the auction." "Is it legal?" I asked, my voice hard and flat. "Perfectly legal," Vance admitted, setting the paper down. "It's a standard mitigation tactic for banks to avoid the legal fees of a full foreclosure. If you pay the arrears, the late fees, and the assumption costs, the mortgage and the deed transfer to you. Regardless of what your mother's will says, the bank holds the primary lien. They can overwrite her wishes to satisfy the debt." "How much?" I asked. Vance looked at the bottom of the page. "To bring the account current and process the assumption, $18,400. I looked at the lawyer. 18 grand. For a house worth over 200,000. A house I had already bled $59,000 into. A house my parents had stolen from me to give to a felon. "Draw up the assumption paperwork," I told him. "I'm going to the bank to get a cashier's check." Within 7 business days, the legal machinery slammed shut like a steel trap. I handed over a cashier's check for $18,400. Money I had easily saved by cutting off my family's free ride. I signed the assumption documents. The title was transferred, recorded at the county clerk's office, and stamped. I owned the Elm Street house. The following Saturday, I drove to the property. The tenants who used to live there had moved out months ago when my mother stopped paying the property management company. I took a heavy iron crowbar from my truck, walked up to the front door, and bypassed the old locks, snapping the deadbolt with one hard wrench of my shoulder. The house smelled like stale beer and cheap weed. It didn't take long to realize why. Kevin had been using the vacant rental as his personal entrepreneurial lounge and storage unit to escape my parents. The living room was trashed with empty pizza boxes, a massive flat-screen TV, a gaming console, and boxes of worthless cryptocurrency mining rigs he had abandoned. I didn't feel an ounce of pity. I went to my truck, grabbed a box of heavy-duty black contractor bags, and went to work. I shoved his gaming console, his wires, his trash, and his ridiculous startup notes into the bags. I dragged them out to the curb. I changed every lock on the exterior doors. Then, I called a professional cleaning crew and a reliable property manager I knew from my construction contacts. Within 2 weeks, the house was immaculate, the walls were freshly painted, and a hard-working young couple with a newborn baby signed a lease for $1,200 a month. I had legally, cleanly, and permanently severed my brother's inheritance. Yes, I am so glad this guy taught him a lesson. He literally took the house out from under them legally and threw Kevin's garbage out. The nerve of that guy thinking he could just keep taking. Do you think the parents will ever realize how awful they've been? The fallout was nuclear, and I didn't have to wait long to hear about it. 3 weeks after the new tenants moved in, Mrs. Gable tracked me down at a new commercial framing site. She didn't look concerned this time. She looked absolutely shell-shocked. "Arthur," she breathed, pulling me aside near the scaffolding. "It's a disaster, a complete disaster on Pine Avenue." I took a sip of my black coffee from my thermos. "What happened, Mrs. Gable?" "Kevin," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "He drove his buddies over to Elm Street to hang out, and he saw a stranger mowing the lawn. He went absolutely crazy. He started screaming at the poor man, demanding to know what he was doing on his property. The man showed him the lease agreement, with your name on it as the landlord. I couldn't help the grim, cold smile that touched the corners of my mouth. And then, Kevin drove back to Pine Avenue like a maniac," she continued. "I was in my garden. I heard the whole thing through their open windows. He started screaming at your mother, accusing her of betraying him, screaming that you had stolen his house. But Arthur, it was your father." Robert finally snapped. That caught my attention. My father had spent his entire life being a passive enabler, letting my mother coddle Kevin while I did the heavy lifting. "Your father roared at him," Mrs. Gable said, her eyes wide. I've never heard Robert raise his voice like that. He told Kevin that he was a lazy, useless parasite. He told him that you didn't steal the house, you just took back what you had been paying for while Kevin sat on the couch playing games. Your mother was crying, begging them to stop. But Robert told Kevin to pack his things and get out. He threw him out, Arthur. Kevin packed 2 duffel bags and left in his rusted car. He's gone. I digested this information slowly. The golden child had finally been expelled. The illusion had shattered. Thank you for telling me, Mrs. Gable, I said quietly. There's one more thing, she said, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. Your mother asked me to give this to you. She begged me. She said she knows you blocked their numbers, but she needs to see you. Just once. I took the paper. It was my mother's shaky handwriting, simply asking to meet at a diner on the edge of town. Neutral territory. I waited 3 days before I went. Let them sit in the uncomfortable reality of their actions. When I finally walked into the diner, I saw my mother sitting in a back booth. She looked like she had aged 10 years in 3 months. Her hair was thinner, the dark circles under her eyes were bruised and heavy, and her hands shook as she held her coffee cup. I slid into the booth across from her. I didn't order anything. Arthur, she whispered, her voice cracking instantly. Thank you. I didn't think you would come. I have 10 minutes, Mom. Speak. She reached into a large manila envelope beside her and slid a thick stack of legal documents across the sticky Formica table. I glanced at the top page. It was a quitclaim deed, a legal instrument used to transfer interest in real estate. The property listed was the primary residence on Pine Avenue. I had Mr. Vance draw it up yesterday, she said, tears spilling over her eyelashes, cutting tracks through her makeup. It's yours, Arthur. Pine Avenue. I signed it. It's notarized. We are transferring the house into your name entirely. Free and clear. I stared at the paperwork. What's the catch? Are you expecting me to turn the financial tap back on? No, she sobbed, shaking her head frantically. No catch. No conditions. Arthur, when Kevin started screaming at me, when he looked at me with such pure hatred because he couldn't get free money anymore, it broke the spell. I saw him for what he is, and I saw what we did to you. We treated you like a bank, not a son. We took your sweat and your honor and we threw it away. I don't want your money. I just want you to have what you earned. It's the only way I can sleep at night. I looked at the woman who had birthed me, a woman completely broken by the realization of her own toxic parenting. I picked up a pen from my jacket pocket, clicked it, and pulled the documents toward me. But before I signed the acceptance, I looked her dead in the eye. I will take the house, I said, my voice vibrating with absolute authority, because it is rightfully mine, and I will make you a deal. You and Dad can live in Pine Avenue, rent-free, for the rest of your natural lives. I will pay the property taxes. I will pay for major structural repairs, because it's my asset now. Her face lit up with a desperate, pathetic hope. Oh, Arthur, thank you. I am not finished. I cut her off. I will give you $350 a month for groceries. Not a penny more. You will pay your own electricity, your own water, your own cable. You will live within your social security means. But here is the blood oath condition, Mom. Listen to me very carefully. She nodded frantically, hanging on my every word. If Kevin ever sets foot in that house again, if he ever moves a single box into that garage, if you or Dad ever ask me to give him a dime, or bail him out of another one of his fraudulent schemes, the deal is dead. I will legally evict you, sell the house to a developer, and you can go live in a state-run nursing home. Do we have an understanding? She didn't hesitate. Yes, Arthur. We understand. Kevin is out. I signed the papers. I had conquered the empire that tried to exile me. I owned it all. But Kevin, desperate and cornered, wasn't ready to surrender just yet. A cornered rat will always try to bite, even if it has no teeth. 2 weeks after the deed to Pine Avenue was recorded in my name, my cell phone rang. It was a local number I didn't recognize. I answered it while reviewing a supply manifest at my desk. Arthur Miller? A slick, overly confident voice asked. Speaking. Who is this? My name is David Patterson. I'm an attorney operating out of the Tri-County area. I am formally representing your brother, Kevin Miller, in a pending civil litigation regarding estate manipulation and elder coercion. I leaned back in my office chair and let out a genuine, hearty laugh. Elder coercion? That's a strong phrase for a strip mall lawyer. David. You can laugh all you want, Mr. Miller, Patterson said, his tone turning aggressive. My client has informed me that you maliciously orchestrated a hostile takeover of his rightful inheritance. You manipulated a bank assumption to steal the Elm Street property, and you coerced your elderly, emotionally distressed mother into signing over the Pine Avenue estate. We are preparing to file a lawsuit to have the quitclaim deed nullified and the Elm Street assumption investigated for bad faith. Is that right? I said, feeling no anxiety, only the cold, sharp thrill of an executioner about to drop the blade. And what is your client's settlement demand? My client is willing to be reasonable, Patterson said smoothly. If you immediately transfer Elm Street into his name and return Pine Avenue to your parents' estate, we will decline to pursue damages for your financial abuse. Financial abuse? I repeated, tasting the sheer audacity of the words. David, let me ask you a question. Are you working this case on a contingency fee? Hoping for a quick settlement payout so you get your 30%? My fee structure is irrelevant. It's highly relevant. I interrupted, my voice turning into a low, menacing growl. Because you are about to work for free. Let me tell you a few things your client conveniently left out of his consultation. I pulled up a digital file on my computer. I always keep receipts. First, the transfer of Pine Avenue was executed by Mr. Vance, a respected estate attorney, who recorded a video deposition of my mother confirming she was of sound mind, acting under zero duress, and attempting to make restitution for past financial wrongs. Your coercion claim is dead on arrival. I heard silence on the other end of the line. Second, the Elm Street assumption was perfectly legal because I was the sole entity paying the mortgage for 3 years. A mortgage I was tricked into paying. But that's just real estate law. Let's talk about criminal law, David. What are you talking about? Patterson asked, his slick confidence beginning to fracture. Did Kevin mention the $35,000 federal wire fraud he committed 3 years ago? I asked softly. Did he mention that he forged my signature on a loan application? Because I have the original forged documents. I have the digital paper trail of the IP addresses tracing back to his computer at Pine Avenue. And I have the wire transfer receipt proving I paid the bank to drop the federal charges. The silence on the line was so profound I could hear Patterson breathing. I never went to the district attorney with those documents, David, because my parents begged me to keep it in the family. But if you file a single piece of paper in civil court against me, I will walk into the DA's office tomorrow morning. I will hand them the forgery evidence. There is no statute of limitations on federal wire fraud. I will ensure your client spends the next 5 to 10 years in a federal penitentiary. Mr. Miller, Patterson stammered. These allegations were not disclosed to me. I suggest you call your client and ask him about the crypto loan, I said. And after you do, I suggest you lose my number. I hung up the phone. I never heard from David Patterson again. 48 hours later, Mr. Vance called to inform me that Patterson had formally withdrawn his representation of Kevin Miller. The pathetic counterattack had collapsed before a single shot was officially fired in court. I found out later, through the neighborhood grapevine, what happened to Kevin. With no lawyers willing to take his fraudulent case, no inheritance to leverage, and no parents to leech off of, reality hit him with the force of a swinging anvil. He couldn't afford his lifestyle. He was evicted from the friend's couch he was surfing on. Forced into a corner of pure survival, the 35-year-old entrepreneur had to walk into a local logistics warehouse, put on a high-visibility vest, and take a minimum-wage job loading pallets on the graveyard shift. He rented a dingy, single room in a boarding house across town. The parasite was finally being forced to feed himself. takes a long time to rebuild a foundation after you've stripped a house down to its studs. 6 months into our new arrangement, the dynamic between my parents and me had completely transformed. Without the toxic fog of financial exploitation hanging over us, a strange, unprecedented respect blossomed. I stopped by Pine Avenue once a week. I didn't come to fix a broken pipe or drop off a check. I came simply as a son. The change in them was profound. Without my endless capital shielding them from consequence, they learned the value of $1. My father, Robert, stripped of his passive enabling, found his pride. He started volunteering at a local food bank, using his time to actually help people rather than managing his son's delusions. He looked me in the eye when we shook hands. He respected me as the patriarch of the family. My mother, Martha, joined a community art class. She learned to budget the $350 I gave them, combining it with their Social Security to live a modest, quiet life. They were saving up pennies to go on a small bus tour to the Grand Canyon, a trip they were paying for themselves. For the first time in my life, I genuinely enjoyed sitting on their porch and drinking a beer with them. The guilt was gone. The manipulation was dead. 2 full years passed. I was 50 years old, my construction business was booming, and both Elm Street and Pine Avenue were appreciating in value. Then, one Tuesday evening, my phone buzzed. I looked at the screen. It was Kevin. I hadn't spoken to him since I told him to watch his empire burn. I let it ring 3 times before I swiped to answer. Arthur. His voice came through the speaker. It didn't sound arrogant. It didn't sound slick. It sounded tired. It sounded like a man who had spent 2 years lifting heavy things. What do you want, Kevin? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. I'm not asking for money, he said quickly. I swear. I just wanted to call you. I'm getting married next month. I paused, genuinely surprised. Married? Yeah. Her name is Sarah. She's an ER nurse. She works the night shift. She's tough, Arthur. She doesn't take any of my crap. When we first met, she looked at my life, my excuses, and she told me I was pathetic. Nobody had ever said that to my face before, besides you. I listened, leaning against my kitchen counter. Is that right? Yeah. Look, Arthur. I've been working at the warehouse for 2 years. I just got promoted to a floor supervisor. I pay my own rent. I pay my own car insurance. I have calluses on my hands. He took a ragged breath. I'm calling to apologize. For the fraud. For the entitlement. For everything. Sarah made me realize that I was a child. And I understand now why you did what you did. You didn't steal anything from me. You took back what you built. I stared at the wall, feeling a heavy knot in my chest slowly begin to untangle. I didn't forgive him instantly. You don't erase $250,000 in federal fraud with one phone call. But I recognized the tone in his voice. It was accountability. I know I don't deserve it, Kevin continued quietly. But I'm sending an invitation to the wedding. I'd like you to be there. Mom and Dad are coming. I want my brother back. If you're open to it. Send the invite, Kevin, I said. I'll read it. I went to the wedding. I sat in the back pew. Kevin looked older, his face leaner, his posture lacking that arrogant slouch he used to carry. Sarah, his bride, was exactly as he described, sharp-eyed, grounded, a woman who demanded sweat equity from her partner. During the reception, Kevin walked over to my table, shook my hand firmly, and looked me in the eye. No demands, no requests, just a man acknowledging another man. We didn't become best friends. We probably never will. But we started having dinner once a month. The family hadn't been destroyed. It had been forcibly amputated, cauterized, and allowed to heal properly. Today, 5 years after that devastating revelation in Mr. Vance's office, I am standing on the porch of the Pine Avenue house. My parents passed away peacefully within 6 months of each other last year. They died knowing they had finally done right by me, and knowing Kevin was standing on his own 2 feet. I own the house free and clear. I walk through the empty rooms, the hardwood floors creaking under my boots. I trace my fingers over the doorframes I repaired, the walls I painted, the roof I kept from leaking. People sometimes ask me if I regret being so ruthless. They ask if taking the houses and cutting off the money was too brutal. They tell me family is family. I tell them they don't understand the real definition of family. Family isn't a blank check. Family isn't a suicide pact where the responsible drown to keep the irresponsible afloat. Love without respect isn't love at all. It's just exploitation wearing a mask of obligation. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for a parasite is to cut off the host. Sometimes, a family has to fall apart completely before it can be rebuilt on a foundation of concrete instead of sand. I didn't just inherit 2 houses. I secured my legacy. I forced my brother to become a man. I gave my parents the gift of independence before they died. And I learned the most vital lesson a man can learn in this world. You can't buy respect, and you sure as hell shouldn't finance your own disrespect. The ledger is balanced. The debt is paid. And for the first time in my life, I am entirely at peace. Man, I am vibrating with energy right now. This is the definition of karma. Arthur wasn't just a victim. He was an absolute titan who finally woke up. His parents were straight-up financial predators. They used the idea of family as a weapon to bleed him dry for $254,830 to protect a literal felon. And the fact that they tried to sue him for elder coercion when they were the ones committing fraud? That's wild. I have zero sympathy for Kevin ending up in a boarding house working the graveyard shift at a warehouse. He got exactly what he deserved. And honestly, Arthur letting his parents live in the house rent-free but cutting their cash to $350 was way more generous than I would have been. I would have sold that house and let them figure it out. This story proves that unconditional love does not mean unconditional financial support. User Toxic Family Survivor says, OP is a hero. My parents did something similar with my deadbeat sister. You have to cut the cancer out. I feel you, Toxic Family Survivor. It is insane how parents will literally sacrifice their successful kid to coddle the useless one. You are 100% right. Cutting them off is the only cure. Stay strong. User Devilboy99 says, Nah man. Evicting your own brother and leaving your parents to starve is too far. Family is family. Are you serious right now, Devilboy99? Did we even read the same story? The brother committed federal fraud and the parents helped steal over 200 grand. Family doesn't commit fraud against you. Arthur didn't leave them to starve. He put a roof over their heads when they deserved the streets. You need to get your priorities straight. User Reality Check 101 says, the real MVP here is the lawyer Vance who practically handed him the keys to take back the houses. Yes. Reality Check 101. Vance finally woke up and did the right thing. Though honestly, he sat there quietly while the mom did her dirty work in the beginning, so he owed Arthur big time.